You see all this here is kind of problematic. There's just no way I'm putting a gaming system on the right side of the monitor in this setup. So it has to go underneath, and we all know that's kind of a sin. Because traditionally, if you want the case on the left side of your setup, everything is upside down because the motherboard is very likely inverted. Doesn't look that great. If only there was a solution. Your build, your vision, any side you like. Always love a good peel. So this is the new OmnyX. And honestly, I'm really liking what I'm seeing. Some really interesting concepts that are being introduced here that I know will take over, not just from Cougar, but definitely expect to see more of this layout later. So this is the OmnyX from Cougar, which aims to solve exactly that, giving you 3 orientation options without changing the orientation of the interior. How freaking cool is that with a movable side I/O? Brilliant. One of the best functional design choices Cougar made was to make sure that all the panels are simply magnetic. It's a lot of panels, but definitely way easier to work in, especially when it comes to this sort of unconventional layout. Definitely one of the coolest features that make this whole case possible are these cable channels. That's also available on the side of the case if you want to display the enclosure facing you. Now, at first glance, the only weird thing in this frame is not the case, but my blue socks. Just kidding. Here we have a motherboard orientation that doesn't face up for your I/O, but it's facing down. I have never seen that for an ATX layout. While this whole PCIe area for the GPU can be rotated 90 degrees for a 90-degree GPU showcase with the riser cable. It will support BTF motherboards with a 360 at the top right above here, which is a really interesting and kind of an unusual position for an AIO. And we do have 4 160mm fans included. 2 of the 160mm fans are regular blades, and the other 2 are with reverse fan blades to support that flexible orientation of the enclosure. In light of all the flexibility, the fan brackets are easily removable. Now, I am all for ease of use, and securing these fan brackets with a single thumb screw at the top is very convenient, but there are no rubber dampeners at the bottom, so it's just metal on metal contact. It's actually way better on this side, but still not perfect. That is way too sensitive. At the back, initially, we have a lot of room, but the power supply will occupy most of it, so cable management will be a little bit trickier than normal. We have a storage bracket over here and a fan controller / ARGB hub for all your fans and RGB accessories. The bottom chamber here is actually quite tall, but that is on purpose to allow those cables to exit with the proper bend, and that also will definitely add to the overall much larger volume to the OmnyX than your traditional mid-tower. Unfortunately, none of the motherboard standoffs have the little captive extension to catch the motherboard, which is a really weird omission. And there are only 2 rubber grommets above the motherboard, but nothing below, which is a much bigger area that is exposed for anything that's coming behind it. The accessory pouch is embarrassingly lazy. Like we have an extra motherboard standoff, but no motherboard standoff removal tool included. At least the user manual is extremely clear on what's possible and what steps you should take to install certain things. And I do appreciate the replacement clips for the frame and our clear zip ties. Obviously, I would not advise having the air cooler facing down because it is completely getting choked up. I think I can rotate this with the cooler. Okay, air cooling is possible. Now this airflow configuration definitely would work because now our air cooler is aligned with the airflow from the front to the back. This is also one of those rare times I would recommend pre-routing the 24-pin cable behind this large cutout because you can't otherwise pass it when the motherboard is installed. Definitely having no captive motherboard standoffs is an issue during installation. To be honest, this configuration is not optimal in any way just because our GPU blocks most of the front intake anyway, so we rely on 2 exhaust fans at the back to remove all the heat accumulated in the space. So an AIO is definitely a must. And it is totally by design. The power supply sits on a single bracket that is removable with a single thumb screw, so you can access the back of the motherboard for easy cooler swapping. And a 360 AIO is definitely a must in the OmnyX, not only for the visual aspects of like actually cleaning up the space, and this doesn't look so bad, it looks intentional, But also from a performance point of view, you're saving a lot on the CPU temperature. Of course, when you're using a 360 AIO versus a blocked air cooler. On the GPU side, however, there is no difference. Also important is that you do not want to use a blower style GPU in this configuration. But luckily, most cards these days are open air like this one, which don't have a significant impact on performance in the vertical position. I also think your choice of an AIO is important, specifically for the pump head design. Anything with a screen would look good in the OmnyX, so I would say choose wisely. And despite the case giving us multiple orientation options, all the text on the motherboard, for example, is still flipped. I also really don't like how visible these giant stickers are on the fans. And I feel like Cougar should have just swapped out the front fans to the back and the back to the front, just so that the hub is visible on the interior, because that's the main showcase. Because realistically, we have a bit of light spill coming from the ventilation mesh, but you don't really see the hubs unless you're looking directly from the front. But to be honest, I really like what's happening here from a visual point of view. Like, I really like this vertical GPU showcase, even though it's not rotated. I feel like you can still see both sides regardless of how you orientate the case. And there's this beautiful consistency on around the motherboard in terms of fans, and the 360 at the top really sort of seals the deal for me, because without it, I would feel the case is kind of awkward. I really do like the trend of unifying the fans in a single frame, especially for like a 360 AIO. And here with this enclosure, it would have been perfect to unify the 160mm fans here as well. And I do find it weird for a case that has so much on display that we have so much open area around the motherboard, because regardless of how you orientate the case, all this stuff is going to be visible, and you do have some control of like where the cables exit and how they exit. I just feel like Cougar should have put a little bit more emphasis on making sure that the motherboard area is as clean as possible. I'd say it's fair to say accessing your cables is incredibly challenging, because you have to do this. Like, on the one hand, I appreciate the innovation behind removing this thing with just magnets and accessing your cables and having this very wide channel where you can stash cables easily. It's just making access to the motherboard I/O very, very challenging. Although the motherboard is high enough so that if you do have standard Wi-Fi antennas, they don't touch the desk. And behind this panel, there's no magic, just a very large pocket where you can just stash cables and not have to worry. Now, do I think Cougar has a winner on their hands? I think in some aspects, absolutely. The orientation element is definitely a win, just without needing to configure anything but the cables underneath, which is its own little challenge. But in terms of like building the system once and then figuring out which way you want to orientate it, I love that. Plus, having a modular I/O while things are plugged in, like, that's also quite brilliant. Unfortunately, it is not as refined as it should be, I feel like, for the asking price of $139 for either the black or the white models, particularly the area around the motherboards. Like, I feel like it should be more closed off. Maybe more rubber grommets would be welcome. The front and rear fans should be swapped, so the RGB hub is facing on the interior to match whatever fans you install above the motherboard if you are going the RGB route. But in general, I love the design. Let me know what you think. And the only other thing you have to keep in mind is that it's not as easy to transport or carry the case from one surface to another, because all the panels, you know, are they just simply magnetic. So you have to like find a particular way to hold the case when you are transporting it. But I'm Dmitry. Thanks so much for watching. Let me know what you think of the Cougar OmnyX. I'll talk to you in the next video.